So finishing the book Incognito with David Eagleman, I now understand the intricate parts of the human mind in that 99.6%, as Dr. E.M. Gilchrist say, we are unconscious beings. It's not like you think about how you walk and take one step in front of the other. It's an automated, unconscious intuition or sub-routine. Basically, it's an implicit memory. If I ask you when you're out walking how you're walking, you won't be able to keep on walking because you're interrupting the implicit memory of how to go about walking. The same with Serena Williams, as David Eagleman explains. If you ask her when she's playing tennis, how she's playing tennis, she will cease to play tennis because it's an explicit memory that interferes with the implicit memory of actually playing tennis. It's so deeply ingrained in the brain as a circuit that is automated that you can't explain it simply from memory. The same goes for a famous guitar player or a piano player that plays in the orchestra. They can't explain how they're doing it because they have implicit subroutines in the brain. Well, just similar like Zlatan, the famous soccer player from Sweden that is actually from Croatia. Now, he doesn't think about how he plays football or soccer. He just plays it and can allocate most of his mental capacity to play soccer and be the magnificent soccer player that he is, because he has trained his subroutines to play soccer like no one else. When a newbie plays soccer, they have to dedicate a lot of energy into playing soccer and in order to just play the game. But for Zlatan, that has played soccer for most of his life, it comes with ease. The only detriment or sort of Achilles is that his muscles are not as in tune as a younger person. For many of your unconscious subroutines or zombie systems that you have in your brain that you are not aware of are instincts. Intuition is an instinct. Empathy is an instinct. And take empathy, for example. Many people mean sympathy and not empathy, because empathy is an unconscious subroutine in your right hemisphere that looks at another person's eye muscles with the left eye to mimic and force you as the individual to mimic those eye muscles. And in that procedure, you will then send a signal to your limbic system to experience the same emotion as the person you're watching. Now, take, for example, a psychopath. A psychopath is only looking with the right eye on the muscles surrounding the mouth of another person and copying those mouth muscles, not mimicking. And that's what you see with a psychopath. Something happens here with a smile, but nothing happens surrounding the eyes. And remember, true empathy is instinct that is unconscious and has been sort of perfected by evolution to help us as social individuals in the Western world, mainly because it's connected to a gene called RS53576. Which are stronger or more prevalent in Westerners than in Asian people, which Asian Chinese scientists found. And in the middle between Chinese and Westerners, you have Africans when it comes to empathy. The reason why they argue this is because Asian people are collectivists and they stick together in a group to defend themselves because they have that as a collective. Like in the Western world, we are individualistic. That's why most likely this gene has formed society in the Western world to adhere to one another through empathy so that we don't disconnect from one another, even though you see it more in the Western world. So how do you really prove that most of humans are unconscious beings? Well, one way to show you that is if I ask you, which direction is your tongue pointing at. Now, you didn't pay attention to that before I told you to feel where your tongue is actually pointing. Same goes for your left big toe and your left pinky toe. You do not think about where they're pointing because it's an unconscious process. You're not really aware of what your body and brain is doing most of the time. You're more likely only conscious about 0.6% of the time. And the reason why this might be so is because there's no reason for you to actually engage in the subconscious actions of your stomach, like your digestion, for example. Feeling about your digestion would be called interoception, just like exteroception is what's going on outside your body. But let's take, for example, your stomach. Now, there's billions of neurons connected to your stomach lining and nerves that are regulating and helping your stomach digest food. But even if you wanted to, you could not feel what's going on inside your gut or your stomach. There's actually no reason for you to do that. And you might also go crazy for doing that. It seems like your brain is conscious only when you need to make a decision or try to sort of understand something logically with your left hemisphere. Now, Dr. E. McGilchrist argues that the left hemisphere is mostly conscious. That's where your language is. You have your Broca's area in the front left lobe, and you have your Wernicke's area on the side, which deals with semantics, for example, how your words are processed and put together. The Broca's area is for making the sound itself. The left side is also connected to the right side. So most people are right-handed or right-footed, like I am, and that's connected to my left side of the brain. And that's what we use when we manipulate stuff. We kick stuff with our right foot. We use our right hand to write and manipulate tools, for example, with ease. And the right side of the hemisphere is more like all the feelings except aggression which you find in the left hemisphere. You have also IQ in your right hemisphere, and you have more myelin, which makes it easier and quicker for your right hemisphere to process information and look for implicit memory. You reason with your right hemisphere by the looks of it. That means that you're looking for implicit patterns in what you're looking at all the time. And those implicit patterns you send over to your left hemisphere through the connection called the corpus callosum, which are 2% of your neurons, more in females than in men. And your left hemisphere then makes a conscious decision on what that is. Now, the left hemisphere, just like the right, can discard of all the information that is unnecessary. That's why narcissism is found in your left hemisphere, because your left hemisphere can also delete all the information that is coming from the right. And you clearly see this in narcissistic personality when they say, I am not interested in any feedback or criticism. And they don't take that. Same with psychopaths, they just can't because they have damages to their brain, especially in the right frontal lobe where you have your impulse control. Many have impulse control issues. For example, in the afternoon when you have low energy, it's hard to resist that piece of cookie or drink a beer or have a glass of wine to help you unwind. And that's because impulse control needs energy, glucose, and you have a lot of it in the morning, but you have very little in the afternoon. But what about human biases? My 2-year young and non-biological little brother down under asked me, and he's quite obsessed with human biases and is very annoyed with people that he thinks are not accurate when they describe things on social media. Well, here's the thing with biases. Your entire brain is made up of biases. And that's because you wouldn't be you and you wouldn't have your personality if you did not have your biases. Now, people form their mental model in their left hemisphere by the looks of it. Sort of like having a Google Maps. And just like Google Maps, you can ask Google Maps to make you lunch, but it really can't. That premise makes you think about when we talk, what are we describing? Well, you're actually projecting your mental model in your left hemisphere that you have shaped throughout the years into a model of how you watch and observe life and the world around you. Now, is that model accurate or is it a lie? Well, it's very inaccurate because most information comes into your right hemisphere, we think, first, because it blips when you look at the fMRI, and then it goes over to the left hemisphere. So that's one little piece of the puzzle, which means that the right looks for some implicit pattern from the five senses that come into play. And then it sends it over to your left hemisphere where it gets modified and added to your Google Maps that you have in your left model. But that means that your model, since you have filtered, your brain has filtered all the information around you, that means that that might not be accurate because you have a limited capacity of sort of absorbing, which means that your version of life as it is your version. It's not your truth, because truth is facts and you have to go to research for that, but you have one version of how you would like to describe the world so that you can function and survive in it. Now, as you can see, if everyone has their little version of how the world works, then you can see how arguments and discussions and verbal fights occur between people. And if you only focus on words, then you will not understand where that person is coming from. Now, here's the thing we know from neuroscience about words. So, if you ask me about what I'm saying, my left hemisphere will make something up so that it makes sense logically for me. Now, is it logical, my answer, verbally? Most likely not. But as long as it works for me and it calms me down, that I have an answer to it so I can understand and wrap my brain around what you're asking, that will be fine for my survival. And it actually looks like the human brain wasn't shaped to remember any sort of truth. It's more or less shaped so that you survive and can work with other people socially by cooperation. So you can see how when you read other people's stuff on the internet, you will get upset over what other people write, which is not your biases. For example, how you made up your mental model of the world, and you will focus on their errors. But remember that when you're doing that, you're doing the exact same as people in a cult or in a religion or a political affiliation is doing. You're adhering only to your own group and you've stopped reasoning with your right hemisphere that they simply have another mental model of the world and how they look at the world than you are. So that's important because you have one version, they have their version, and we are more than 7 billion people on this earth that have different versions. Now, cooperation is about having a flexible mind, and with your right hemisphere, if you believe the hemisphere hypothesis from Dr. E.M. Gilchrist, that you need to reason about these things and say that it's not about being right. Because if you win an argument, you're basically killing that relationship. And humanity is built on cooperation and working together for survival. So being right has nothing to do with being to survive. Only surviving is the important thing. Now, another way of understanding the complexities of the human mind is that, take for example, a blind person that was born blind know nothing about vision. And when you ask a blind person that was born blind how they see things, they don't dream or see things in pictures. Only people that were born with vision and then lost their vision will actually describe things in pictures. So when you're wondering and saying that people that were born blind have a deficit, well, and you close your eyes and it's black, they don't actually see the world as black. For example, you can blindfold yourself and in 90 minutes, your audio neurons in the back of your skull will take over your visual neurons to amplify your audio so you can hear better. You will actually hear better within 90 minutes of blindfolding yourself. So it's important to understand that even though if you're looking from it from your perspective or your mental model, don't think that that's how everyone else sees the world. For example, there are 14% of women on this earth that doesn't have 3 primary colors in their vision. They actually have 4. Now, what is the 4th color? Well, we will never be able to see that, especially men. And there's only 14% of women that can actually see a 4th color, primary color, on this earth. But that's special to them. Nobody else can understand what the 4th color looks like because we don't have those neurons in the brain. Another way to look at it is like, imagine if you weren't born in civilization and you're walking in the desert, and in the sand you find a radio, an old radio with one knob that turns on the volume, turns it on, and one that sort of tunes in the frequency so you can listen to the radio. You pick it up, you manage to turn it on, and you hear someone speak. Now, that you can relate to because you're speaking, you can hear yourself with a voice, with your ears. But when you start investigating it like an engineer does, you open up the backside of the radio, you see wires. You see a yellow wire, you see a black wire, and you see a blue wire. When you disconnect the yellow wire, you notice that the sound completely disappears. When you reconnect the yellow wire, the voice comes back. Then you can deduce, logically speaking, with your left hemisphere, that the yellow wire is for sound. Now you do the same with the black wire, and you notice that when you pull the black wire out, that the volume goes down. When you stick it back in again, the volume goes back up. So what have you deduced from this? Well, the yellow wire deals with the sound, and the black wire deals with volume. Just like your voice, you can decrease your sound and you can increase your sound. So that's logically, you can understand that. And then you can put it together and say that, hey, I'm an expert in radio technology. Well, are you really? So that's called reductionism. And when you're simplifying things with your left hemisphere, your mental model, you're being a reductionist because you know nothing about radio waves or how that sound got to your machine. You still don't understand that you have a receiver in the radio that receives the radio signal, and that a few miles away there is a radio tower sending out that radio signal to your radio that is picking it up. You also don't know that there's someone speaking in a microphone or how the microphone works and that is connected to that radio tower so that you can get the sound in your radio. So be careful with a reductionist view in thinking that you have all the truth because you have a mental model of how to describe the world. There's plenty of things that we don't know about humanity and the human brain, so that we shouldn't say that we have any sort of truth. For example, what I'm saying has no truth at all to it. You should go and verify what I say. And don't believe people on the internet. But that's my takeaway of the book from David Eagleman, his latest one called Incognito. I highly recommend it so that you can understand the perspective of the human mind and how we should not simplify things, but look upon each other as complex individuals that are magnificent as we are and have subroutines that we all run on, that we are pretty much unaware of.